Good evening from Wolfville and Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. It is summertime here, and hopefully all of you have some time to pause and celebrate the good things in your life, whether it be vacations, birthdays, weddings, reunions, or just some much needed downtime. I also hope that you have time to pause and reflect where we are as a province, a country, and the world, and the challenges that lay before many of our nation's members, and how we as people can listen to the truths and contribute to the reconciliation. Many of us use pictures and photography to help us understand, to help us express emotion, share ideas and experiences, and so on. So rather fitting that we have Michelle Coleman with us this evening. My name is Una Proudfoot, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs in the Office of Advancement at Acadia. It's a pleasure to introduce our guest this evening, Acadia alumna Michelle Coleman, class of 1995, who is here to help us learn how to take great photos using our smartphones. So now for this evening's speaker, if I can take a moment to introduce you to Michelle. Michelle Coleman is a professional Nova Scotia photographer who primarily focuses on landscape and portraiture and is known for her unique vision and stunning results. While photography is Michelle's main pursuit today, she has also been teaching sociology for Acadia University since 2001. Michelle has completed 3 degrees at Acadia, earning her last one in 1995. In 2016, Michelle published a book titled Portraits of Nova Scotia, which featured some of her favorite landscape images from around the province. The same year, she teamed up with a local photographer and organized Friends for Syria, an initiative using their photos to raise funds to purchase Arab-English dictionaries for new Canadians from Syria. Michelle is a contributing photographer to the Valley Faces of Business directory, published annually by the Rotary Club. As well, she completed a project for the Nova Scotia Museums to photograph and catalog thousands of museum artifacts. In 2018, Michelle was recognized in the Nova Scotia legislature for her contributions to photography, and in 2021, she began teaching smartphone photography. Welcome, Michelle, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have a pretty keen group of people who are interested to hear what you have to say, to share your tidbits and tricks with us, and I'm sure we'll all be at the ready with our smartphones as you present your information. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Una, and I'm really happy to be here tonight to talk about photography. It's something, it's a big part of my life, and something I have a lot of passion for. So it's great to have an enthusiastic group of people with us here. And so we'll get started. We want to go over to the slides. And I should say at the outset, because I don't really know what the sort of the skill level or knowledge level about photography is with the group that's here tonight, what I'm going to do is to approach this with a range of tips and suggestions so that people who are newer to photography or people who are a little more advanced, there should be something for everybody. So, so that's my intent of how I'm going to proceed with this tonight. So if we just go back one slide, yeah, actually, okay, the next one ahead. I'm not controlling the buttons here on this, but okay, that's a great spot to start, I think. And so before I get into this, though, I will just say there are basically going to be 4 main themes of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And one of them is what are the advantages of using smartphones for photography. The second one will be how to take stunning photos using elements of composition, as well most used features of the smartphone, and then things to keep in mind when you're out and about. That should take us to about 22, and then we'll have 20 minutes or so to answer questions. But as Una had noted, you're welcome to send them throughout the presentation as well. So we look at what are some of the advantages of using smartphones for photography. I think there's actually quite a few of them. And my top advantages, the reasons why I feel it's advantageous to use a smartphone, one huge one is ease of transportation. So my camera backpack to take along my lenses and everything, it's about 15 pounds. And so that's a lot of gear to lug around. So if I'm going out, just maybe walking around the city on a trip, you know, just to be able to take a half decent quality camera with me easily is a huge plus. So ease of transport is a major plus to being able to use a smartphone to capture images. Accessibility as well. And so if you're out walking around, you can easily just grab your cell phone and take a photo. And so I recall being on a trip one time and had all my gear on my back. And I saw this moment come before my eyes. It was in New York City. It happened so quickly. And I knew the only way I was going to get that was to quickly grab my phone, my cell phone, and take that photo. If I had taken my backpack off and tried to set up to take that photo, that moment would have been lost. So ease of use, accessibility, ease of transport, all key things for me when I want to use the smartphone over my DSLR. Point of view is something also I think is a huge plus. And a lot of the work that I like to do is from different perspectives. And so if I want to get down low and shoot something from a different level, like from basically right down at the ground level, I can easily get down there with my smartphone. Whereas with the regular camera, what happens is when I'm trying to go there, I would have, I'd be putting it there, but I wouldn't be able to see very well, or I have to lie down on the ground. So point of view is easy to capture a whole bunch of different points of view because you've got the phone that will easily, you can hold it up high or go down low so much more easily. Also, photo sharing capabilities, it's really easy to share on the fly. So you can take something in that moment when something's happening, you can be very current and share it to social media. So much easier than to take images off a card, put them on my computer, work with them, export them, and then upload them from there. So we're saving a lot of time. So the photo sharing capabilities are much greater. Someone is saying here they can't see the slides, and I'm not sure we can help out with that technically. Sandra and Una. In any case, I'll continue while you guys work on that. As well, there's a number of apps that I have on my smartphone that allow me to edit easily. There are some ones that do some really nice creative things that you can easily do without having to spend hours trying to figure out Photoshop. And for me, that's a program that's very labor intensive, and it's not particularly easy to get onto for people. And so the apps, again, it's easy to do in very few steps, and so that actually I think is a huge advantage as well. Everything just happens it's much more fluidly with using the apps on your phone. Also, in terms of framing up a shot, many times when I go out, and I'm serious about taking some photos, what I do, one tip that I had learned before, and I found it really useful, is to basically take my phone out and then take some photos, some test shots with my cell phone, and take a look at what I like. And so I'm not experimenting as much with the regular camera. And I know people often think that the number of photos that you can take with a full frame or a regular digital camera is limitless. However, there are actually a limited number of shutter clicks that you can take. You're looking at likely in the hundreds of thousands, but with the cell phone, you're saving that, again, saving time. And so framing up the shot is good to give that sort of test shot to see how it looks. And then when you get, say you take a number of tests and you figure, okay, this is what I like best. So then you just go and focus on that one for doing your setup. Also, it's very cost effective, and even though cell phones are rather pricey these days, the full frame cameras or regular digital cameras will run you much more money. The lenses are so expensive, you can easily be into thousands of dollars just for one lens. And so you've got, you don't have to pay for subscriptions to things like Lightroom and Photoshop, which are fairly commonly used software programs for editing. Apps sometimes do cost money, but sometimes there are many good free ones as well. And so it is cost effective to do it all on your phone. And the next tip I would say is easy selfies. And so when you're doing selfies, you can see exactly how it's going to look when you're doing it. You're holding the camera pointing towards yourself. You can see how the expression is going to come out. Whereas if you're going to set something up with a timer and you're jumping in front of your camera, it's a lot more complicated for the timing to work out great. So that as well is a plus. Cloud backup, again, it's easy. You can save your photos, upload them, and you've got another copy of them somewhere. So those are some pretty strong advantages, I think. And so more and more, I find myself using my smartphone. And before I figure, why would I want to do that if I've got to, spend thousands of dollars on a full frame camera? However, you know, again, like because of all these reasons, the ease of use, I think, is reason why I get out there more and more to do that. And also, I think the quality is really exceptional now. I just upgraded recently to an iPhone 12, and the quality is really very strong. And so I'm quite happy with it. I don't feel I'm compromising to be using a smartphone so much. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is basically our intro page here to composition techniques, and I have 10 of them that I'm going to go through with you. I had a fairly good page or pace here. And so composition basically refers to the elements in the photo in the scene, the way in which we arrange it in a frame. And there are basically some rules that you can use to try to make your images more attractive. And they're just suggestions. They're not things you necessarily have to do, and some of them perhaps even contradict other ones, but just some things to keep in mind. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so the first rule or suggestion would be a rule of thirds. And you can see this screen here is divided into 6 different boxes. And if you look at the intersection of where the thirds line up, you can see here there are basically 4 points in that frame. And if you put, instead of putting a subject in the middle, if you put a point of interest on one of those vertical parallels, especially where the focus point would be where the horizontal and the vertical lines meet, then that can add as well to your composition. And so let's move on to the next one. And so this is central composition and symmetry. So you can see this photo is not following that particular rule, but it works really well when you have something that's grand, such as this. You've got everything's more or less equal on each side, and you've got a lot of symmetry here. And so that showcases really well when you frame that in the center as opposed to on the thirds. Another instance in which you might want to consider using that would be reflections. So so if you put that in the very middle on a horizontal plane, then that as well is a time when horizontal, or sorry, central composition and symmetry would work well. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so patterns and shapes, they also hold a lot of visual appeal, and they suggest some kind of harmony. And so the top one is an image of a catwalk. And that's in Toronto. And to me, that was very interesting visually. And I saw this, and had a lot of wow factor just being there, seeing that. And so, and I think it photographed particularly well too with the color contrast here, the black and white. And then we've got here below that, what's affectionately known as Bezos Balls. This is Seattle, Washington, and the headquarters for Amazon, actually. And so we've got these 3, grouping of 3, which again is sort of a rule of odds. It would be another rule of composition. And we've got these repetition of patterns and shapes here in the horizontals that you can see, and also in the verticals. So again, you might want to consider looking at that. It's not just in environments that are manufactured, but you can also see that in nature. See petals of a flower and different things that are repetitious, that they add an interesting and pleasing composition. Let's go on to the next slide here. And so as well, photos are 2-dimensional by nature, and to add some depth to it, what you can consider doing is looking at a photo and trying to create things that are different depths of field. And so in the bottom photo, for example, we have the boat here. This is a scene from Mahone Bay, and or sorry, Blue Rocks. And we've got the boat in the foreground. In the middle of the photo would be the pier, and we've got the shacks. And then we look back a little further, there's the land, the piece of land, and then beyond that we have the sky. So we can see there's basically 4 different levels. So that adds some dimension as well to the photo, and some interest factor. And so you can also see the top image there, the abandoned house. I shot this down in the South Shore, and we've got the lupins, and then the tree, and then the house and the sky. Not particularly colorful, but again, we've got the different layering here in the image. And so that's something to keep in mind, in particular when you're doing landscape photos. Can add a really nice layer of interest to that. So let's go on to the next slide. Number five is leading lines. And so the whole idea here is when you have a leading line into your photo, which in this case is the line in the middle of the street, it basically draws you in and points you to something. It gets you looking around. And in this case, what's interesting is the cloud in particular. I saw that really magnificent cloud. This was going across on the way to Port Williams, coming from Greenwich. And jumped out quickly, again, did the low point of view. You can see that I'm really close down. This is just a cell phone shot, and captured the cloud. So a very simplistic photo, but with the leading lines adding another layer of interest to the photo. Okay, so let's go on to number 6. Also, a focal point. Sometimes I see people who do a lot of landscape photos. They have a lot of things in a lot of items in a photo. Dangerous, yes. um, um, however, what can happen is that you can look around a lot and your eyes sort of going all over the place, but it's good as a focal point. And so this is Walton. It was a hike I was on a few years ago. And the top photo, I like the lines sort of going up and the lines of the sky, the clouds. But there's no real particular focal point for me. It's lacking a little something. And the next photo down, we've got this woman here taking a photo, the same beach, and to me, my eye goes to her. And so the landscape being a little bit more interesting here for me, and also the human element, again, adding to it and giving us a focus point. So try to find something that stands out, maybe something that pops in a photo, something that you want to draw attention to in a photo. And so, so consider that as well when you take photos. Okay, the next one. Simplicity, minimalism. And so I've spent a lot of time searching for beautiful places in nature and beautiful light and beautiful moments, but sometimes they're really simple things. And sometimes it's just something as simple as a tree. The photo here on the right was at a place I used to work. And behind the trees was a bunch of brush, not particularly appealing. There was an old shed, had a little bit of interest factor, but what I really liked here in this photo was the trees, the texture of the trees. And so again, that cell phone photo, I just shot up on it and isolated the trees. And so the trees was really what I was speaking to me, what I wanted to showcase. So again, you don't need a lot. It can just be focusing on something. Textures are interesting in and of themselves. The middle photo, city skyline in Toronto, and what I liked about that was the mirror reflection on the buildings. But also, if you look closely, you can see the blue is got a lot of pattern to it, the different colors, and that's actually clouds reflecting on the building. And so that was, again, I just isolated instead of this really big, busy scene. I just chose to focus on the actual few interesting towers with the glassy reflection going on. The photo on the left, probably never guess what it is, but it's actually one of the tall ships in the Lunenburg Harbor. And again, so much there. And sometimes, when I look at a scene, it's just very cluttered. I like to isolate things. And for me, I thought, well, that's really kind of interesting, abstract sort of art looking in the water. And so that photo, I one of my favorites from coming away from shooting the tall ships, actually. So again, focus on something of interest and keeping it simple there's a lot of appeal in that. And minimalist, I think, is there's a lot to be said in terms of creating appeal and interest in visually, aesthetically appealing images. So so consider that as well as when you're going and shooting, if you've got a lot of things going on, just perhaps hone your focus in on one thing in particular. So let's go on to the next slide, number 8. So I want to change focus here a bit and talk about expression and talk a little bit about doing some portrait work. And I do a lot of portraits now. When I first started, I was actually doing a lot of landscapes, and I've moved more into portrait work. And part of that started with going to Cuba. And for me, Cuba was a great getaway in the winter and all, but it was a lot of sand, miles of the sandy beaches, the same thing, which was nice and all, particularly given our Nova Scotian winters. However, what was really speaking to me there was the story of the people there, the culture, the buildings, dilapidated buildings and things. And so that's where I really kind of marked a turning point for me, just seeing some of these faces that really spoke to me. This guy here was one of those people. It seemed like every year I went, there was one person and I'm like, wow, I would love to have this person's portrait. And so part of me capturing a portrait of somebody is to find something about their character. This guy was just riding down the street. He's a real true life cowboy riding down the street on his horse. And I jumped out of my car and went up to him. And he had the most wonderful smile. And so I think when you're taking portraits, one thing that to look for is character in a face, but also expression. If you've got somebody looking at you with a blank face, it doesn't really convey the same sort of messages or story or give you some kind of connection with them. So really focus. I think one of the key things when I do portrait work is to really get the expression good with people. And so that is about a lot of times about a relationship with a person. You can't necessarily just walk in and put a camera in someone's face and expect to get a great expression out of them. But you're taking the time to talk to them, trying to get them comfortable. Sometimes building rapport, but also joking around or getting them to think about something pleasing to them are some of the things that I would do. And so this guy, it was easy because he was just delighted I wanted to take his photo. So it was an easy shoot. But expression, I really think, is a big part of what's going to make a portrait. So let's go on to the next slide. We've got here some more portraits and also a landscape here with a boat. And I'll start with talking about the people. Up top, we see here a man and a woman, and I could shoot that a lot of different ways, and I like to get in really close. And my point of view is eye level, and so I'm there sort of in that moment, and when I do this, I'm bringing the viewer in up close, and you feel it's very personal. You get to see, and here we can see this nice engagement between the guy and the gal, and we see he's busy putting oil in the car and having a good chat with this young attractive woman in front of him. And so the point of view here, I feel, really helps make the shot more powerful because you're there close and it gives you a whole different perspective and a whole different feeling. And again, the portrait to the right of that with the woman, the bandana, again, it's up very close. My point of view here is eye to eye, and I like to shoot that in particular when I'm working with people because I think it brings you up really close. It's sort of a different kind of connection. If you shoot up on somebody, it gives them this feeling of importance. So it's telling a different story depending what point of view that you use. And so I strongly encourage because I think it makes it more powerful to come eye to eye with people when doing a portrait. And the last one here, I want to mention the point of view is also important when you're doing storytelling. And so this one I went low, and I went low on this shot in particular because you can see there's some damage to the boat here. And if you look closely where the boat hits the rock, the boat is all destroyed in the underside. And so it would be a whole different photo from the other side. You wouldn't see that. And so part of creating a photo with impact and interest factor again is telling that story here about what has happened. And this is actually a Nova Scotian scene again. This boat went afloat from the Lunenburg Harbor and came up near the ovens. And and so that's to get a bit of an interesting story here. But so I'm using that photo and that point of view to tell that story of that particular what happened with I think it's called the Schwabe, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go on to number 10. Here, and the last one in terms of points of composition is to tell a story. And so here we've got this is an image fresh off the press from the weekend, actually, and it was a Western theme shoot that I did with quite a few cowgirls and a few cowboys. And here, the story that I'm telling again is this woman, sort of, is a woman empowerment photo. You can see she's got a very athletic physique. She's in charge of the scene. She's got this rope again. We've got the shapes here, and we've got a certain expression that's conveying story. And we've got this guy on looking towards her in a supportive role. And so telling a story is a good approach to creating some interest and creating a compelling or stunning photo. So this one I didn't conceptualize before. I went out to the stables a few days before. This was a shoot I had planned for quite some time, but getting there, just sort of going through, the place and living sort of, I guess, in the shoot, I'm I'm creating these ideas sort of on the fly of what I want to do, but I have, I think, usually certain ideas in mind generally in how I'm going to approach it. And then depending on the particular models that I'm working with and the props that I can pull in and things, what story I'm actually going to tell there. So, so that is the end of the composition elements. And so now we're going to switch to the most used smartphone features. So let's change the slide here. And I see that we're at 7:29 and I've got 2 slides left here. And so I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. And these are some general things for people. I think if you have a lot of comfort level in terms of using your cell phone, you're probably familiar with these, but I just want to review them in any case. The different shooting modes. So when I'm shooting on my iPhone 12 Pro, I have different options that I can use. So I can take a regular photo, but I can also work in a portrait mode. And so for me to go there, so I have here on the bottom here when I open my camera app, so there are different modes here that I can be shooting. So I can just slide over and I can go to portrait, which is going to blur out the background somewhat. And so that's one I would often go to. I go to the photo mode for general everything being sharp, and then the portrait mode is going to focus more on the individual and blur the background somewhat. And also I can change here if I want to get really particular about that. I can go up to the what shows here as the F. And that's basically your aperture, so that changes your ability to blur the background essentially. So I won't go through demoing how all these work, but there's slow motion, time lapse. These are all fun features that you can use. Also, there's different dimensions that you can take the photo, and so you're going to want to sometimes maybe take a different, basically different orientation. So you can do a 1:1, which is a square photo. You can do a 16:9, which is going to create more of a rectangle. And so I like to use that for landscapes. I think it's particularly appealing for landscapes. 1:1 you might use for doing portraits, particularly if you're going to post to Instagram. They use the 1:1. The f-stop, I just showed that one. So again, it's changing your depth of field, which means that you're going to focus on something in front of you and blur out what's behind. So that works really well if you've got a cluttered background that you want to isolate the subject and remove sort of the distractions. Exposure adjustment, I'll show you that here. So if I'm taking a photo, you can see here, if I tap on the screen, maybe you won't be able to see, but there's a little yellow box that comes up with the sun beside it. And so if I slide my finger up and I get that, it's going to brighten what I see. And if I go down, it's going to make it darker. And the way in which that helps me is that what the cell phone wants to do is expose for a certain brightness. But if I'm shooting a sunset, I don't want it to go brighter necessarily. I want to keep it the way I see it. And so I can tell the camera, in that case, how I want that photo to be taken. And when I'm using a full frame camera out doing that, I'm often slowing down the photo and to capture more light. So again, I don't want to brighten it. I want, if anything, sort of darken that. So another feature here to keep in mind would be a focus lock. So if I want to hone in on something in particular, I can tap here. Okay, oops. Okay, and it's going to go to a lock. Now, right now here we're going to see once we get that lock on. Not sure how well you can see. It's not coming up here right this moment. But it usually comes across AE lock. So auto exposure, autofocus lock here. Let's get this. Just one second. I'll have to focus it somewhere else here to get that to come in. And so once you get it there, it's not quite coming easily here, but you basically tap and hold it. And once you get it there, it's going to keep that particular part sharp. So you can zoom in, say there's some small detail you want to get really sharp. You basically lock it in there and then you can zoom out. And that's how I would use that. The grids, as shown in the rule of thirds, are basically the lines that we have here. So it's our 3x3. And so that can help you determine where you're going to frame something up. The timer, another feature here that I would use, and on my phone it's just this little thing right right here to the left. And so I can set it for 3 seconds or 10 seconds. That allows me to put my phone down, step back, and maybe get fully in it and to get more of the scene. And so that's helpful in particular for taking selfies. And the last thing I would say would be the apps that you have on the phone. And one I would use the most would be the one that's actually comes right in with the phone itself, but also Snapseed. It's a free program and it allows you to do some creative things and to do a bit more than the standard program that comes with the actual camera or with the actual smartphone. So there's other ones that are great, like I've been experimenting with them recently, removing backgrounds just like that. Photoroom is one that will do that for you. That's free. Photo Leap, and there's quite a few other ones that will do some special effects. And so a lot of fun to play with them. It can be really addictive to sit there and to go through and play with them. You can create some really interesting things very, very simply without years of fooling around with learning Photoshop and things. So let's go to the next slide, which is our last one here, and just some things to keep in mind when out and about. So these are just some tips, I would say, if you're out wanting to do some photos and you've got your smartphone on you, is to, number one thing is to keep it easily accessible for those moments, like I said, out in New York City streets, and this great shot just came for a moment, that split second, you got to be able to respond to things quickly. And so, so for me, it would be my pocket, not buried in a purse or a backpack somewhere. Also, consider your purpose in taking the photo. So if you're doing just a shot to capture a moment, then to just quickly grab your camera, press the shutter, that's great. If you want to do something more artistic, then that's when maybe you're going to want to take the time and try to possibly make a scene nice to have something a little bit better keepsake or whatever. And so you're going to want to maybe set things up a bit and clear out your scene or find a good spot to take a photo, survey the scene. And so if you're going out and you come across, like for example, I can think of one shoot I was on where it was 3 pools and there was some really nice stuff there and a lot of waterfall areas. And my tendency would be to get really excited when I'm on a scene and just want to take up my camera and start taking photos, but you can spend a lot of time and sometimes the first scene you come across is not the best. So if you just take your time and you walk around, you see what's most interesting and then set up to shoot, make decisions based on more information, you can probably be more effective in terms of getting some good shots and being time efficient. Also, I would say even look behind you, because a lot of times when there's like the sunrise or the sunset, like there's a lot of interesting clouds in the sky, and sometimes the first thing you focus on is not the best. And so you've kind of always just got to keep your eye open to it. So the number 4 tip I'd say would be pay close attention to light. And so if you're doing a portrait and the light is really bright on people, their expression is not going to be good. And if it's really dark, your photo is going to be grainy and it's going to be hard to see the detail of the face. The same applies to whatever it is you're taking a photo of. So you've got to have light is a really critical part of that. And also, light can set mood, it can tell a story. And so think about light. And I think that's probably the most important aspect is photography really is about capturing light. And so I can't emphasize that one enough. Also, ask for what you want. If you're going down the street and you see this guy walking and you think, wow, he would make for a great photo, consider asking people. Consider asking them if you see a scene, an old barn or something that you like. Many times when I've got some really amazing scenes, it's because I've taken the time to go up and ask people, hey, I think this is great. Do you mind if I take a few photos? Recently, I shot 2 places which basically people were solicited, what do you think about doing a photo shoot here? And it was amazing. These people basically set up for hours helping me out, supporting me in the shooting, all just for the creation of art. So it's amazing how kind people can be and how generous they can be to support. So I would encourage you to have the courage to ask people, to pose some ideas to them. And Also, so number 5 would be, okay, I guess we're on 6, give direction. So when you're working with people, one thing, I work with a lot of models, and some of these people, even professional ones who I work with, they need direction. Some of them can really take off and do some great posing, but most people are not there, and most people really want your help to know, what you can do, what you can tell them to help them to look good. So if the hair is in your eyes, for example, you might want to just, say to them, pull the hair back off your face. Oftentimes when I'm on a shoot, I'm telling people, okay, lift your chin, position your legs this way, okay, pull your right shoulder this way. And then, so when I get them in a particular pose that I want, then I'm trying to get an expression, a certain expression out of them. So for me to get that shot, a good shot out of somebody, I have to give a lot of direction. And so don't be afraid to be a little bit bossy with people, because it really makes all the difference. People need your help. And so I encourage you to take that sort of leadership with them. Also, I would say take your time to get the photo right in the camera. And many times I've gone to places taking photos, and then I come home and I think, oh, this little thing here is distracting. And so I want to take it out. And sometimes if, like say, for example, if you take a photo of somebody and there's a tree coming out of their head, that's a hard edit to make sure you can do it, but you want to make sure the hair looks natural. And so if you take the time when you take the photo to remove those sort of trees that look like they're growing out of somebody's head, or these things that are popping in a photo that shouldn't really be there, maybe it'll make your photo better in the end, and it will save you more time as well. So another thing I would say to do, and this is something I think is really important, is to review your photo before you think you're done. And so this is something I always do when I'm doing portraits. Many times if I'm looking through a screen, taking a shot of somebody, I can't tell their eyes are open, because the minute I press the button, their eyes can be open, but then from the time that I press the button to the time the photo is actually captured is a split second. However, the eyes can close. And so you can think, oh, this is a great photo. You get home, and then how many times are somebody's eyes closed? And too many. So you got to look at your photo, make sure it's what you want before you're actually, I think, before you should consider it done. Also, I would say number 9, an important one is to seek permission. Quite a few times I hear people saying whatever happens in public is fair game, and it's it's permissible to take photos of people in public view. However, I think there's what's fair, but also how you'd want to be treated. I think, in myself personally, I don't like people sticking a camera in my face and taking my photo without asking. So also, because I have worked for the government, I know that it's a good practice to ask permission to some. We even had to have consent forms signed before using any photos of people. And so I think it's good. Seek permission, make sure people are happy with it, and make sure that people are okay with what you're doing. And the last one I'd say, tips to think about when you're out and about, is to capture what speaks to you. And a lot of times, I think we're taking photos of things, but you're capturing, okay, I was here, this was an event that happened, but something that's important to you, I think, is, what is it that, if you look at something in a scene, like what is it that really stands out to you? And so maybe in taking that photo, you can try to focus on those features. If I'm in a particular place in nature and there's something that's really amazing to me about that particular scene, that's what I'm going to try to showcase. So I'm going to focus somehow, how can I show this unique feature of this particular place? Or how can I capture the mood, something that I feel when I'm there? And so a lot of photography is about communicating mood and stuff. So think about those kinds of things when you're out taking photos, and it should help give you some good results. And these are some of my pointers to help, I guess, in terms of things you might want to consider when taking photos. There's a lot more that we could talk about on any one of these. However, at this point, I'm going to leave it open to some questions. And so, okay, yes. If you would like to contact me or follow my work, you can find me. Here's the way to find me, basically Instagram. I have a photography page on Facebook, also a website, and then you can reach me if you have any questions. You can reach me at Gmail as well. And so I'm going to stop here, and we've got about 15 minutes now or so to deal with any questions you may have. So feel free to jump in and give me some. I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And certainly great descriptions on your slides as you were presenting. I know we had some folks who had some difficulty with seeing the slides. So just a reminder to everybody that we recorded the session and we will send out the link so that you do have an opportunity to have a visual on what you were explaining during your presentation. So just to let folks know that. So there's a comment already that says, I thought your photos were great. Were they shot on a smartphone?
Okay, good question. I knew somebody would likely ask that. And of all the times I've been teaching the smartphones, I think that's the first time it's been asked, and not all of them were. I picked photos for a particular purpose, and so I went with that as my primary purpose. And I will say, before I got my 12, my camera was far better than my iPhone 7, and so I did not use the iPhone so much as I do now, but I am making the last 6 months or so, I've made more of an effort to take as many as I can with the smartphone so I can show more that are exclusively smartphone. Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out as well that there are so many versions of phones, right? I mean, you spoke about the portrait option, which is not an option on the phone that I currently have. So taking time to get to know the device that each individual has. I think what you said was it can get quite addictive to get in there and start seeing all the different features that you have on your phone. But I think that is one of the attribute or one of the variables is having some time or finding some time to muck about with it, which leads to a question that I have. We do have some questions that were submitted prior to the presentation, so I hope to get to those as well, Michelle. But as the interviewer or the facilitator, I get to ask my questions first. I promise I won't hog the time, folks. I promise. But when you talk about being addictive and sort of getting into that, kind of seeing what features can do, is there ever any concern about clicking something or playing around with something that you're going to mess it up somehow? Because I think a lot of folks, particularly as I think, get on in age, I know my sons are always so quick with what they can do with it. I want to try things, but I'm afraid I'm going to muck it up.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, actually, and I think there is that concern that if you start out where it's good and then all of a sudden you do something, if you're trying to remove something and all of a sudden it's like, wow, you just took a chunk of someone's head out. Now what? You could hit reset. That's the really nice thing, that you can go back to where you started. And so, and also when I'm using the photos in the apps, I export as a copy. And so I have the original, and then I have the new and improved version, or this sort of the artistic creation. And so I have both that I can then do whatever I want to with. So that should be fine. If you remember, you can hit reset essentially.
Okay, so what I heard there is remember there's a reset and also export as a copy so that when you do
Yes,
start mucking around with a picture, you still got the original to go back to.
exactly.
Perfect. See, great advice. So we have a question from David. He says, I find if I take dozens of photos of a subject, one or two may turn out well. How many photos do you take to get the perfect shot?
Yeah, well, it varies. It truly does. And it depends on, sometimes it depends on what it is I'm shooting. With people, it's very particular. And so the more experienced I get, the less photos I take, because I know more when I'm there what I'm looking for. And so um, I just did a shoot on the weekend. I took 459 photos in 6 hours. And how many will I keep out of those? I haven't dug into it yet. I called out 90 some of them right from the start. They're deleted. Something wasn't quite right. A hand went in the wrong place or whatever. Um, out of those, I might have 40 to 50 that I would really like a lot. And there would be like maybe a few that would be like, wow, like just blow me and away. And so I'm really looking for the wow factor. And so I think that's a really important point that you can take. They can look, sometimes you don't always know when you're there, but you can take them. And then when you get home, then you can kind of see some fine differences when you get them up on a screen. And then you can pick through. And so I think it is good to take quite a few and then try to be picky, try to get it right while you're there in what you're envisioning, but sometimes you won't know till you get home. And so how many is really hard to say. Depends on how much time I have, what it is I'm working with, who it is I'm working with, how experienced they are. It's really hard to say, but typically I wouldn't take 400 or 500 of them. I would normally take maybe 100 or less. So, but there was a shoot from 10 until 3 with 10 different models. So it was a big day.
It's a
So
lot. David says, "Wow, I feel better now," with a smiley face. Thanks. That's great. Question from Dawn, who says, "What is your recommendation for editing apps? Keeping in mind, I would classify myself as a beginner."
okay, so editing apps. I say Snapseed, sorry, is very user intuitive. It's easy to get onto. You're swiping across, swiping up. Um, things are, you can go in and it's easy to guess what it is you're doing. Like you can go in and experiment and play with it, and you can see what's happening. You can straighten things up, you can crop them, you can change your exposure, and there are so many different things. So I absolutely love Snapseed, and it's free. So that would be the first one. Get Snapseed. Um, and I would say that's my go-to app. You can do some fun creative things in that too. It's easy for beginners, but there's also, if you look on YouTube, you can see that some people have gone right to town with doing amazing artistic creations that you think, wow, how do they do this? But you can do a lot on Snapseed. You truly can. So I would say Snapseed, and I would also say Photo Room, because you can remove backgrounds, which is something I like to do a lot. I like to
Okay.
remove backgrounds when I'm doing selfies, to be frank, because I go for the light and I forget what's behind me. I go for the good light on the face and then cut out the background and then put in whatever background I want to. And you can easily swap those out.
Okay, thank you. You've got an endorsement from Sandra Simmons on Snapspeed, which is a good endorsement, knowing what Sandra's experience and quality
Yeah.
is like for her photos. So,
Yeah.
a couple of questions that were submitted prior to the session, Michelle. One of them is best smartphone to take pictures with. I have an iPhone 8 Plus.
What is the best smartphone?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've read some reviews on that, and I think it was Samsung that was number one, but I'm a loyal iPhone user, and so I just go to iPhone, to be frank. I like the universality between all the Apple products I have, and iPhone is up there. It's one of the top ones. I think it was one in the review that I read. So I think it's a matter of what kind of phone do you prefer? And I think people tend to be pretty loyal to brands, and so myself, I prefer iPhone. It does a great job. It does all I need and then some. It is expensive, but it's you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. So I would encourage people to read reviews, and again, to go with, do you prefer Android or something different than that. So
Yep, absolutely. And there's a follow-up comment from Dawn, who asked the question. She says, "I need to create something really cool so my son will stop making fun of me." So hopefully you've given her some tidbits to be able to do that. Question from Bill says, "Do you miss telephoto when using a smartphone?"
no, I honestly would say I don't, because I don't use telephoto a lot. I do miss my go-to lens is a 24 to 105 on a digital camera, and I do miss sometimes, but I just get used to stepping in and stepping out. And so if I could just, can we go back one question here? Dawn, I think her name was, the woman who wanted to create something cool. I just
Yes.
wanted to pull this here, and I hadn't planned to show this tonight. However, this was done with Snapseed. This is a photo that was taken in the airport. It's my son. You probably recognize him, Una, but
You?
taken in the airport, and behind him is actually some airport um, architecture. I did. I took this, put this around him, and so I layered photos all in Snapseed. So that was a really fun creative project I did. So I taking the basic photo, I put a vignette darkening that, and then I laid on top of that something I saw in an airport. It was in a poster, and it had a sort of a computer science kind of logo, which is what this kid is into. And I put it all together, and so it was a really fun artistic photo and I just did it all in Snapseed. And so that's what I really love about these apps, that you can do these amazing creative things in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Really.
And great that you revisited that, Michelle, because we do have a question from Andrea who says, what was the name of the app Michelle recommended for removing the background? And that was, in fact, Snapseed, correct?
No, Photo Room is the one
Oh,
for removing the background.
beg your pardon. Sorry about that, Andrea. It's Photo Room.
Yeah. And
All
the thing
right.
is, I will say it will leave a little logo saying Photo Room on your photo, but then you can put it in Snapseed and you can use the healing tool to take that out for when you put in the other background. So you
Photo
want
hack. Photo hacks by Michelle Coleman. I love it. So we've got time for maybe one or two more questions, Michelle. So another one is, are there special instructions for people who are Black with dark skin in terms of lighting?
special instructions. I think anytime when I'm doing a shoot, the number one thing when I'm working with people is to set the light. You have to get the light right, or your photo is not great. So I have shot a number of people with dark skin, and the only thing I have found odd was that I had a different color hue than what the person's natural skin was. Having the correct skin tone for any individual is so critical. Like, if you shouldn't have like skin that's a different color than what a person looks like. And so I I am not sure of anything special you need to do other than to make sure you're checking it and it looks authentic on your screen before you leave. And so you want to make sure you're not having hot spots, which are the really bright, shiny, the white spots. If your light's too bright, it's going to be like really super white on anybody. So you don't want those glares coming off anybody's face, but just check to make sure like your light is not too bright or not too dark, and there's not any sort of weird color cast coming in. And other than that, I'm not sure what to suggest.
Thank
But
you.
make sure when you're developing that it looks as you had seen it, because it's offensive to people if you don't get their skin color right.
Absolutely. So one of the things you talked about, Michelle, was sort of seeing a potential picture, right? So I go back to the one that you took of the
Yeah.
clouds from the road that Nancy was concerned for your safety on, as was I. Um, do you have any suggestions on how one can improve their eye in seeing something that they later will want to see in a picture? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, I started to try to take more pictures, and I knew one of the things I needed to do was slow down. Like every time I go somewhere, I'm in a hurry. So I knew one thing I had to work on was just slow down and
Yeah.
take in my environment. Do you
Yeah.
have any other suggestions on how one can improve what they're seeing so that they take better pictures, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I think you need to develop the eye for it. And so looking at other people's art, I think is helpful. But for me, the usual guide that I go for, if I say wow in that moment,
Mm.
then that works for me. If I don't say wow, it's not going to be a wow when I get home, because the camera cannot capture all the human eye can see. So you kind of got to be mesmerized, or sort of, like seeing something that's really attractive in that moment. And if you don't, no, that's for landscapes. Um, so I think you just got to do again what speaks to you. Like, if something attracts you, then that's really all that matters, because it's who is the photo for? Ultimately, it's for you, first of all, right? So capture what you love.
Perfect. That sounds pretty good to me. You can't insert the wow factor if you didn't see it to begin with, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat function for the next minute or so, because we are wrapping up. I do want to be done at 8 o'clock because I know people have lives and summers and all kinds of things to get to, and we like to be respectful of time. So I'll keep an eye on the chat function as I let you know that we did do a draw for people who registered for this evening's session. And David Bent, I know that you had some trouble at the very beginning, but I think you managed to see the presentation, and I think you said that you've asked some questions as well. So you're also the winner of our draw prize. So congratulations to David Bent. We'll get something out in the mail to you from the Acadia Alumni Office and the Alumni Association to thank you for being with us this evening. And thank you to Michelle Coleman. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for presenting your work, your love, your passion, for giving us some pointers on what we can do with our own phones and our own lives, and really appreciate the time you've taken to share with us this evening. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Hopefully you will join some more virtual events that we have coming up in the very near future. Check out our events landing page. You'll see recordings from all our past events and upcoming events as well. And we are heading into our first in-person event in over a year and a half with our golf tournament coming up around the corner as well on July 23rd. There is a question that says, will this recording be made available? Yes, absolutely. We send the link to the recording out to those of you who attended this evening and those of you who registered this evening, but we also include it on our events landing page. So you will have plenty of access to it, but you can always shoot us a note if you missed that email or missed the landing page URL. So thank you. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, Una. It's a pleasure to be here.